Cougar fans, what's up? It's Matt Baiamonte and Mitch Harper here from KSL Sports, live from Lavelle Edwards Stadium. Third consecutive home game here, third consecutive home game without fans. It is weird. It's really weird. And BYU survives a big-time scare from UTSA 27-20. BYU favored by, 34, 35 points. They win by 7. As you're watching this game, Mitch, like first quarter, second quarter, third quarter goes by, what are you thinking as it becomes clearer that this is going to be a dogfight?
Yeah, I thought that, BYU clearly was in a game where UTSA, I think we all underestimated them. I know I did. I thought that BYU would do much of what they did the past few weeks where they would just kind of roll. And you saw that early on in the offensive series, but it felt like that Neil Pau fumble kind of changed a little bit of the tone, the momentum a touch, where UTSA felt like, okay, we stopped this high-powered offense that came into the game number 1 in the country. We got to stop. And we forced a turnover. And it just kind of gave them that little bit of belief, it felt like. And that was enough to where UTSA was just kind of hanging around for a long period of time. And it wasn't anything that was just completely disastrous by BYU, because you look at the stats, you look at the numbers. Zach Wilson had a nice game, but it just felt like there was a few mistakes here and there that kept UTSA in this game.
There was really mistakes, and they weren't always big mistakes, but every single drive it seemed like, whether it was a penalty, whether it was a fumbled snap, whether it was a pitch to Tyler Algier that was muffed, it just seemed like BYU was hurting themselves drive after drive. Now, again, it wasn't anything big, but those little things, they add up. When you have negative plays, it hurts, and I think that was something you saw through most of the game today, where just BYU could not sustain multiple offensive drives where everything was clicking. Penalties, the turnover to Neal. At the end of the day, though, BYU still almost gains 500 yards. So if this is what a bad performance is for this BYU team is, then I think you live with that. But I think for me, the frustration is, and I've been saying this so long on our radio show, Cougar Sports Saturday, Mitch, is when you play these teams, inferior teams, college football, the nature of college football is that style points matter. Margin of victory matters. And you've seen that through the first 3 weeks where they're killing people and they're being rewarded in the polls. That's not going to be the case this week. I think BYU would be lucky to stay at 15, but it's been over an hour since the game ended. I'm still not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, it's a game that I think that you're glad that BYU gets the chance to learn after a win. They're going to 4-0 for the first time since 2014, and that's a positive. I don't think this game is similar to maybe ones against Toledo and USF, just in the fact that BYU was such a huge favorite. Those games last year, it was a close game where Toledo, they were only a 2-point favorite. Against USF, they were a 4 or 5 point favorite. This was a game where BYU was looked upon to just come in and annihilate this UTSA team. They had a lot of question marks at quarterback, and Lowell Narcisse for UTSA, he comes into the second half and really injected life into that Roadrunner passing game that really was non-existent with Frank Harris. Some of those passes Harris threw, they look like punts. That interception was one of the worst throws I think I've seen. And hey, look, it happens. It's going to happen. We've seen some bad throws, some great throws, but Narcisse really did a nice job. He ended up with 229 through the air for UTSA. But Zach Wilson had a really nice game too. 22 of 30, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, which is a good thing. There were some close calls, but again, I think that the thing I take away from is that BYU has to learn this lesson in improving and kind of humbling themselves a little bit after a win, which is a good thing, because next week against Houston, you play like this against Houston, you're probably going to lose on the road. So this is good to maybe get that out of the way now against the UTSA team that you play this again. I think BYU would win by double figures, but on today in a setting where anyone can win in college football, UTSA hung around and made this thing a lot more competitive than we thought.
And one thing that's becoming clear to me, Mitch, is the attrition for this BYU roster starting to show itself, especially on the offensive line. You got to credit Joe Tukawafu. He's battling hard. He's not James Empey. And when you lose Tristan Hoge and James Empey, these are two guys who have NFL in their sights. And James Empey for sure, Tristan Hoge maybe, but certainly a talented guy. When you're down those type of guys against probably the best defensive line that BYU has played so far, it certainly had an impact today. Zach Wilson was scrambling a lot more than he had been previously, and he made pretty good decisions, which is a positive sign for Zach Wilson. But you're starting to see that attrition in Kavika Fanua. I mean, thank goodness he avoided the targeting ejection, because you go down Fanua for the first half against Houston, Chaz Ayu out for the year, then you're thin at safety. It's just you're seeing now that COVID-19, some injuries, it's catching up a little bit to BYU.
And with the defensive personnel too, you saw a lot of more 4 defensive linemen, and that was a little bit of a different look because we've seen a lot of 3 linemen, and that's had a lot of success. Today they only end up with 1 sack, but it was a big one. Gabe Summers comes up with the big sack to really kind of put in close to that UTSA drive that was in BYU territory, and they looked like they were on the move once again. So a little bit surprised that BYU's defensive line didn't create more pressure against the Roadrunners, but some other positives that I do take away from this game. Tyler Algier, that guy continues to be, I think, one of the best stories for BYU this season. He got the start today, 19 carries, 116 yards, 6.1 yards per carry. He's an inside runner. We knew that, but man, the top end speed of Algier, he pops off some big runs throughout the day.
Yeah, and another bright sign for me was on the defensive side. Isaiah Kafusi led the team in tackles, 9 tackles. He's having a fantastic senior season. That linebacker group has been rock solid. Peyton Wilgar is unheralded. I think that he's been playing some great football. Doesn't always get mentioned, but he's someone who is just assignment sound. Defensively, I don't think there were many issues in the front 7. There were a few breakdowns in the back half, but positive sign there from defensively. And one thing that has been great to see is we just haven't seen a game yet where this team can't tackle, where we've seen the previous seasons where missed tackles were a problem. That hasn't been the case so far.
Yeah, that's a good point. And again, I think Cougar fans out there watching, and if you're seeing this, share your commentary. How do you feel about today's game? You can share it on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. You can also get at us at Mitch_Harper, at Baiamonte Matt. We're the hosts of Cougar Sports Saturday on KSL News Radio from 12 to 3 every Saturday. But BYU goes to 4-0. It's a win, but a lot to improve on for this team. And maybe, was this a game of byproduct of reading the headlines? Because I know we put out stuff on KSLSports.com highlighting how good of a team this has been. And yes, BYU has been dominant. They've been one of the best teams in college football to this point in terms of just statistical output, performance, dominance, whatever you want to call it. They've been one of the best. But I think this might be maybe a little bit of a taste of, hey, you still got to get a lot better. What you were doing the last 3 weeks won't be good enough if you want to run the table and maybe be in that New Year's 6 conversation.
Pardon the lawnmower behind us.
Yes.
They are trimming the grass here at LaVell Edwards Stadium.
Yes.
I wasn't. Do they always trim the grass after a game? I don't remember that.
I think it's new with 2020 with COVID because there's no fans. So it clears out quick so they can just get right to it, get mowing this thing. Usually, like the last few games, this thing's just pitch black, and it's just dark. You see the KSL News Radio lit up logo. But no, hopefully we get to a point the next time we're here too, Matt, when BYU hosts Texas State in a couple weeks. Hopefully we see fans because it's been it's just still a little bit weird to, we were talking before the game about 15 minutes before kick, and it was like, oh yeah, it's 15 minutes before kick. It feels like it's 3 hours before kick, just how empty it is. But still, not an excuse for today. I mean, BYU's used to these empty stadiums, and the Cougars get ready to take on the Cougars in red next week against Houston in a Friday night showdown against the Houston team that I've been hyping up for a lot this offseason. So it should be a big game next week.
You have been hyping them, Mitch. You've been hyping them. We don't really know who they are since they've only played one game, but we got a few more minutes here on the live stream. If you have any questions, hit us up. We'll read them. We'll answer them. One thing that I do agree with, we just wrapped up the post-game news conference with Kalani Sitake, Dax Milne, Isaiah Kafusi, Zach Wilson. I think Zach Wilson said it best, which is, if you're going to learn some lessons, this is a great way to do it. Because when they go to the film room, it's not going to be pretty. Mistakes, missed assignments. But to learn those lessons in a win, to kind of humble yourselves going forward and not have a bad, ugly loss, I think that is probably the silver lining, the good takeaway from this game. Is you still win the game. Is it disappointing? Absolutely, because teams in front of them lost.
Yeah.
If they had another great showing, they could have moved up. I don't think that's going to happen now, but you still rather win this game, and maybe long-term, this close win could benefit them more in the long term than blowing them out and then having a setback later.
That's a good point about the national polls. Do you think BYU moves up?
No.
No. I mean, I think best case scenario is they stand pat at 15, right? I mean, that's
that
kind of my
huge
feeling.
Huge win to stay at 15. I could see them slipping down to 16, 17. I think they'll still stay in the top 20 because they still won the game. I mean, I don't think they're going to get dumped for winning the game, but they're not going to move up.
It'll be interesting, too, to see UTSA going forward. I mean, I know that once the game's over, you're not going to be really following much UTSA, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is a team that hangs tough in the Conference USA because they were a lot better than La Tech. This was the best BYU team or best team that BYU has faced to this point of the season. And credit the Jeff Traylor's team coming in and not being phased by BYU. You look at the box score, though, and BYU statistically outplayed UTSA, 470 yards total offense to 359 for UTSA, 292 passing, 287 for UTSA. So, again, Lowell Narcisse kind of kept that thing close for the Roadrunners. Rushing yards, 178 for BYU, 172 for UTSA. And, one sack was a little bit surprising. Each team had a turnover. But again, this was one turnover, for UTSA. But I think that, BYU is going to be a team that's to move forward and try to build off this, because still they can run the table, I think, this season. There's still enough there from this game that says there's still that explosive playmaking ability from the offense, and defensively, like you said, the sound tackling, I think, is a positive from this one too.
Before we get to this question from Casey, I do have to point out, I just barely remember this. I think I'm over the jet sweep. There was a little scare there where Gunnar Romney took the final jet sweep of the game. I think there was a fourth or fifth attempt. Big time tackle, got a long look from the medical staff, came back, appeared to be good, but I just don't think you have the depth at that receiver position right now to be putting Milne or Romney in harm's way unnecessary. I'd like to see that go by the wayside. And it just hasn't been effective this year either.
Yeah, that's a good point. And BYU was a little bit nicked up in this game. Gunnar Romney, Lorenzo Fauateo was out. He was on crutches after the first quarter, which is a bummer because he's a big piece to the interior of that defensive line. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, don't put the jet sweep
to Romney.
To Romney, because, he's just too valuable. Next to Zach Wilson, Gunnar Romney is probably the most important piece to this offense. Without Gunnar Romney, I think the whole season has a different outlook without that guy. He's been so good this season. He ends up today with 4 catches for 80 yards. Again, 20 yards per catch. He's a big playmaker. He's
had several 20-plus yard receptions in each game this season. You take him out, maybe Cody Epps fills that void. I don't know. He's young. Cody Epps, that's a guy, hey, put him in the jet sweep. He's got some athleticism. That's an appropriate place to use him. Not Dax Milne, not Gunnar Romney.
And that's been one of the nice things, too, just kind of touching up on the wide receivers. Haven't seen much rotation this year. I think that's one of the reasons we've seen Romney, Milne, Powell be the top 3 guys, because they're not getting rotated out all the time. I really thought we'd see much of the same this season from previous years, where it's like, okay, you're going to play 6 or 7 guys. So I thought Epps, Jackson, Terrence Fall, all these different guys would maybe see time. That's not the case, and I'm okay with that, because the top 3 guys have clearly emerged, and I'm very comfortable with these 3 continuing their roles.
You can echo that sentiment across the offense. Today it was exclusively Katoa and Algier, and at tight end it was mostly Carter Wheat and Isaac Rex, and Mason Wake had some moments in different packages, but that's it. And I think those are the best BYU players. Play them every down. To the question, was BYU, this is from Casey, was BYU trying the hard count like UTSA? If not, I wonder why. I don't remember seeing a lot of hard count from the BYU offense. Do you?
Not much. I didn't see much of the hard count at all. But I do think that, BYU, at times, I felt like they just kind of, there wasn't that excitement on the sidelines a little bit. And I think that played a role in all this, because that's been a big thing for this team to this point of the year, is that juice squad on the sidelines where they're getting hyped up, and Wes Wright's dancing the night away. Like in the pregame, he was cutting it up on the grass and dancing. I'm like, okay, here we go. BYU's in a good mood. They're in a good spirit. They're ready to roll. But clearly there was something lacking today. And again, you get by with a win, and that's the positive thing for BYU. But again, a lot of things to work on. But as far as the hard count, Casey, I didn't really see much of that.
Well, it was the first game, too, that BYU didn't score first. And I think that Neil Pau turnover didn't amount to much, but I did think it took away the momentum, because they marched down the field in a hurry. That was, I think, the third play of the drive. It was just chunk play after chunk play. They were down there in a flash. They don't get points. And it's like, it just seemed like it was a snowball from there of mistakes that prevented more points. Because you look at the offensive numbers, 470 yards, 1 turnover. You think you'd be above 30 points with those numbers.
Yeah, that first offensive series, the wise guys in the desert, if you're into that sort of thing, they look pretty smart. And then that foul fumble, and it changed things quite a bit. But again, BYU comes away victorious, 27-20. Full recap on KSLSports.com. We'll have more on KSL News Radio next Saturday, as we'll have Cougar Sports Saturday recapping the Houston game, and of course, podcasts throughout the week. Cougar tracks as well, all sorts of stuff. And then KSL News Radio morning and afternoon drives on your legacy home, the Cougars. So anything else before we sign off, Matt?
Well, just one question for you. Fans in the stands at Houston?
I think so, because they had fans at the Tulane game, and BYU is only like one of 6 teams that has yet to play in front of fans this season. So hopefully they can end that streak next week against the Cougars in red, which should be a really good game. Again, I don't think Cougar fans in blue, BYU fans, should be down on this team. I would look at next week and say BYU is the favorite. But I think it's just got to fix some things, make sure to avoid coughing up the football, avoid costly or penalties, and this offense will get clicking once again. And the defense, I think, too, just maybe being a little bit more dialing. Because, again, I think emotionally, I think a lot of people just thought you're going to coast. You're going to win this game. Everyone's patting you on the back. I think this was a good lesson for this team.
Well, and also, at this point, now that you do have some good opponents on the schedule, you just want to crescendo to Boise State. That's the game that matters in terms of getting a lucrative bowl invitation. You've got to show up well there. Until then, I'm now just firmly in the just win these games, get to Boise, and then you can make a statement. Because making a statement in early November against Boise and then a chance a month later against San Diego State, though I think 2 wins there would be enough, even with a couple close wins against teams you should blow out, I think would be enough if you're able to go undefeated to have a New Year's 6 bowl game.
So for Matt Baiamonte, Mitch Harper, KSLSports.com. Listen to us next Saturday on KSL News Radio. Check out all of our podcasts on KSLSports.com. And we'll be back next Friday here on Facebook and YouTube and Periscope recapping BYU versus Houston. Should be a good one in class.